What would happen if a peaceful civilization were threatened by something no one could comprehend, an ancient entity disguised as an asteroid? If you had only 36 days before your planet was wiped out, what would you do? This is the story of a world with no weapons, no army, only light and hope, and of another species known as the Deathworlders, who broke every law to save them with blood, fire, and sacrifice. Stay until the very end, because perhaps this isn't just the story of a distant planet. It's a question meant for you. The skies above the city of Lazarin were no longer peaceful. The stars that once served as the spiritual backdrop of the Ayalari people's lives now trembled, blurred by thickening bands of dark dust drifting across the upper orbit. Inside the Silas Halance, a cathedral of harmonic peace with its resonating light crystals, the air had turned heavy with fear. The once clear pillars reflected ghostly pale faces, and the multi-layered eyes of the Ayalari had lost their signature serenity. Suspended in the high chamber, Elaris Vothe, High Elder Priest, stood at the center, operating an ancient sphere of photonic energy, the oldest computational device on the planet Varelian. A projection appeared, and like the first beat of a funeral drum, every gaze snapped toward it. A fractured black mass, glittering like burning coal, tore through space on an unstoppable path. But it wasn't the image that silenced the room, it was the sound. A low frequency so deep it felt like it was tearing through the soul itself. "This is the Black Star Shard," Voth said, his voice trembling. "It once destroyed 4 ancient planets recorded in the Blood Moon archives, and now it's heading directly for Varelian, estimated impact in 32 rotations." A wave of dizziness swept through the council. Whispers of apocalypse, star betrayal, and forgotten curses surged like a tsunami. The Alaria civilization, older than the stellar charts themselves, slender beings whose heartlight pulsed in rhythm with their emotions, had never needed war. For 12,000 years, they had cultivated peace, healing music, and floating crystalline cities atop energy seas. But now, all that beauty faced something that could not be reasoned with: total annihilation. "There is no feasible defense system," gasped Ralik the Starseer, head of astronomy. "The Black Star Shard originates from an undefined sector of space. It bypassed all magneto-alert systems. Core diameter is approximately 22 kilometers. Its speed is increasing. Exponentially, the object is not falling, it is charging." A silence shattered through the layered harmonics of the Great Hall. "What about the Galactic Accord?" asked one of the younger magistrates, desperation in his eyes. "Aren't we under protection? Doesn't the Alliance guarantee defense in times of peril?" "We are merely a footnote on their map," Voth uttered, bitterness coating his words. "To them, we are a living artifact, precious enough to monitor, not valuable enough to defend." The silence thickened, heavy and final. Elaris Voth turned back to the sphere, his 3 slender fingers glowing with violet light as he lifted the interstellar signal orb. "We will not die in silence like islands swallowed by the sea," he declared. "We will send our signal across every dimension, every frequency, even those the Accord forbids. If there is any hope, it will come from those willing to cross boundaries." The spiritual harmonists, those who channeled light energy, began to gather. The entire planet seemed to brace itself to compose a final symphony of distress. Energy towers were redirected. The emergency signal was encoded in every language the Ayalari had ever translated. Sound, light, even pure emotional resonance broadcasted through biosynthetic frequencies. "This is Varelian." Elaris's voice rang out across thousands of wave towers. "We have no weapons, we have no warships. What we do have is culture, memory, and a green, breathing world. We are about to be destroyed. We plead to anyone out there, help us survive." No one knew if anyone would hear, but in the silent panic of the galaxy, the signal rolled outward like the first pebble before an avalanche. And somewhere far away, in a region of space uncharted by any official map, another being heard the call. It did not represent peace. It was not programmed by councils or elected by alliances. It represented fire, steel, and the unyielding will of humankind. the warship Judicar began to turn. The third outer Rima place, where the light of dying stars fades before reaching any sensors, was where humanity had taken refuge. No one else in the galaxy dared to venture there. The region was littered with residual radiation from ancient weapon tests, toxic asteroid belts, and the scorched atmospheres of worlds once consumed by ambition. To others, it was a cosmic wasteland. But to humanity, it was home. The interstellar warship Judicar, nearly a kilometer long, rested silently in orbit above the desolate world of Dren VII. Its hull was layered in heat-dispersing alloys and scarred by countless battles. There was no music here, no twinkling lights, only barked orders and the mechanical heartbeat of a vessel built for one purpose: intervention. Colonel Darius Kale, commander of the Judicar, entered the command bridge with the gait of a worn-out predator, iron gray eyes and a scar slashing across his temple like a signature carved in steel. He was a living legend among military circles, the only man to pilot a warship solo through the Zygarn plasma belt and live. He had no family, no homeland, only the mission. "What's the update?" Darius growled, his voice gravelly and heavy, like a cannon freshly fired. Lieutenant Sora, the communications officer, turned to him, pale-faced. "We've received a distress signal, encoded in 12 layers of language and accompanied by emotional pulses." Darius raised an eyebrow. "Emotions?" She nodded. "Fear, despair, and something else, like a melody whispered, like a prayer made of light." "I didn't come here for poetry," Darius muttered, stepping toward the console. Sora activated the transmission. The room flooded with trembling light and resonating sound, a chorus of the soul. Not a mechanical message, but a cry for help, torn from the heart of a civilization that had never known war. Alongside it came images: a lush green planet, shadowed by the crimson deathglow of the Black Star Shard. Darius clenched his fist. "Coordinates: neutral zone, planet Varelian, approximately 27 light-years out. At strategic acceleration, we could reach it in 8 days." "A world under threat, and no one else has responded?" Darius asked. "No response from the Galactic Accord. Underground networks report they're convening assessment committees." Darius' scoffed, sound like a dagger scraping against steel. "Of course. They'll assess, they'll debate, and a planet will burn." Silence gripped the bridge. "Prepare for approach protocol," he ordered. "Alert all support vessels. I want the full Theta tactical fleet off the docks in 4 hours. We're going to save them." Major Reeve, Chief of Tactical Operations, spoke up. "Colonel, this is a Accord-controlled space. Entering without permission could be seen as a treaty violation, possibly an act of aggression." Darius snapped his gaze toward him, cold and sharp as a blade. "Do they have weapons?" "No, sir." "Do they have warships?" "No, sir." "Do they have the right to live?" Silence. "Then we go." Back on Earth, inside the Strategic Operations Academy, Admiral Arya Solon Supreme, commander of humanity's independent intervention forces, received Judicar's report just hours later. Her eyes, which had witnessed 17 extermination campaigns, could not look away from the image of a green world cloaked in the Black Star's deathlight. "Is this worth the risk, Admiral?" asked her chief of staff. She answered without hesitation, "If we can do something, then our moral duty is not to let the innocent die in the name of bureaucracy. The Accord will not approve." "Good." Arya gave a frostbitten smile. "Let's remind them who we are." Within 12 hours, 4 rapid response vessels, a mobile refinery rig, and 2 Leviathan-class cruisers were launched, all bound for Varelian. A full strategic response plan was drafted in under 6 hours, all for a world without weapons, without hope, just a signal of light and a silent scream splintering through the void. There were no declarations of war, no statements of humanitarian concern. There was only action. And the engines of war began to roar through the stars, driven by the most human instinct of all, to save those who cannot save themselves. The skies of Varelian burned as the human fleet pierced through the upper atmosphere. Though the descending vessels were small diplomatic, reconnaissance, and light transport craft for the Alari, who had never witnessed a warship, The scene felt nothing short of an invasion. Each jet-black ship, armored in thick steel and propelled by roaring engines, sounded like a foreign beast tearing through the air of a world made of light. Citizens gathered beneath the high crystal domes of their cities, gazing upward with a mix of awe, fear, and whispered prayers. In the central square of Verithan, the capital, thousands of Alari stood behind soft energy barriers, once used to guide the flow of artistic festivals. Now, ceremonial robes were replaced by bio-monitoring devices, as the governing councils feared cultural contamination or worse, unwanted contact. Elaris Voth, still reeling from the desperate night of signal transmissions, stood atop the reception platform, his bioluminescent eyes dimmed by anxiety. "Their landing signal is precise," Voth murmured to his closest advisor, Ilari Thurn. "No drift, no fluctuation. They fly as if they do not fear death." "Elaris," the advisor whispered, "we called to the stars. Perhaps we called the wrong kind." Before he could respond, the ground trembled. One of the shuttles had landed. Unlike the Alari's graceful, silver-winged ships, which hovered silently on electromagnetic fields, the human shuttle crashed down like a slab of metal hurled from the sky, cracking the earth beneath it. As the smoke cleared, a heavy door slid open from the coarse hull, revealing silhouettes never before seen in Varelian's light. They were shorter than the Alari, but broader clad in flexible armor, eyes sharp like frozen glass. Professor Sarah Miles, leader of the first contact team, descended first, followed by engineers, translators, and security officers. On her chest was the insignia of the Interstellar Earth Coalition flame, entwined around a planet. The Alari stepped back. A few flinched as a human soldier adjusted the weapon at his hip. There was no threatening motion, yet the image of a species wrapped in steel, moving with predator certainty, was a reality too alien for a world shaped by breath and light. Voth stepped forward, raising a violet glowing hand, Alari's gesture of welcome. "I am Elaris Voth, keeper of the light records. Thank you for coming." Professor Miles nodded, her voice translated through a linguistic device. "I am Sarah Miles, representative of Earth. We heard your call for help, and we've come to assist." Silence fell. Those words simple, powerful echoed through the square like an ancient chime. A young Alari girl pushed past the guards, holding a glowing crystal orb symbol of peace. She approached Sarah, intending to offer it. But in that moment, a gust of wind surged, triggering a human soldier's sensor system to mistakenly detect an energy spike. He drew his weapon, and time shattered. A pulse of plasma shot into the air, slicing past the girl. The Alari screamed. Native guards reacted instinctively, releasing bio-resonant waves in defense. A human soldier reflexively fired. A small explosion rang out. Blood sprayed from an Alari guard's back. Silence broke into chaos. The crowd screamed. Crystals shattered in the surge of energy. The ground fractured. Those who could not understand each other with language now understood through fear. Sarah Miles rushed between the two groups, shouting in both human speech and translated tone. "Stop! We came to save you, not to kill!" Elaris Voth, his face streaked with blood and shimmering light, raised his hand. "No more firing. They only reacted. They are from another world." It took nearly an hour to contain the chaos. 1 dead, 3 injured, but a greater disaster was averted. In a temporary field tent, Sarah and Voth sat across from each other, steam rising from cups of hot nutrient liquid between them. "We don't carry weapons," Voth said. "We're not used to warriors. Your instincts, they feel like death." Sarah nodded, weary. "It's not something we're proud of. But where we come from, if you don't react that fast, you don't get the chance to explain. Your world, it must be brutal. And that's why we're the ones who can save you from what's coming." A chime sounded from the comms unit. A projection appeared. A meteor shower fragments from the Black Star Shard, passing through a stellar belt. A coastal city had been erased. Nothing remained but ash, dust, and scorched earth. The Alari no longer asked questions. 3 days after the incident in the square, the tension between the Alari and the humans remained tight as a drawn bow. But warfare had been replaced by something more urgent. A monster was coming. Aboard the command ship Judicar, Colonel Darius Kale stood before a tactical display projecting the asteroid's trajectory. The simulated paths wrapped around the heart of planet Varelian like veins of blood. But what stunned the officers wasn't its direction, it was its behavior. "We're detecting autonomous correction patterns," reported Lieutenant Sora. "The asteroid is adjusting its course incrementally, as if it senses other objects and avoids minor collisions." "It's piloting itself?" Darius narrowed his eyes. "Or it's being piloted from within?" A deadly silence fell over the command bridge. On a temporary scientific station orbiting Varelian, Professor Sarah Miles and her research team worked around the clock, analyzing the latest scan data from the asteroid's magnetic field. Beside her was Talon Vare, one of the first Iolari to step aboard a human vessel. A historian by training, Vare combed through the ancient Blood Moon archive of the oldest surviving records detailing the days of deep darkness. "There's this," Vare said, his voice like wind from a cave. "An engraving from the Stone Hollow Library speaks of a light eater, a being that appeared in the primordial era when even the stars trembled. It did not come from our world, it lived inside the cores of celestial bodies. When a planet died, it moved on to the next stone." Sarah looked back at the 3D scan. The asteroid's core was not iron. It was something else, something no scanner had ever categorized. Its density defied physical law. "We once called it Cernal," Vare continued. "The sleeper in the belly of stone." Sarah went cold. "God help us. We're not facing a rogue rock, we're facing a living entity, an ancient being wearing an asteroid as armor." Back on Judicar, the analysis reports arrived. Internal structure, core composition, energy feedback patterns. There was no solid core, no crystalline structure. Instead, cells. Panic surged through the internal alert systems of every crew. "We're dealing with an ancient alien organism," Sarah reported directly, via interstellar comms, to both Darius and Admiral Arya Solon. "It's not a natural asteroid. It's a living creature, capable of manipulating gravity and magnetism to navigate space. Its body is encased in ultra-dense rocky armor, but the core is organic, ancient biotissue." "Can it be killed?" Darius asked, flatly. "Not conventionally. It absorbs energy pulses. Lasers, plasma, even nuclear warheads only feed it. It metabolizes energy like nutrition." Darius turned to his tactical officers. "What about fragmentation tactics?" "Useless. Its outer shell functions like adaptive armor. It self-repairs and appears to learn from each attack." At that moment, Talon Vare interjected. "But there is a weakness. The legends state that Girnal requires deep hibernation. It must maintain a stable core temperature to preserve its tissues. If we collapse, its core heater disrupt its biological rhythm, it will break down. We'd need to reach the biological core," Sierra added, "which means tunneling through nearly 5 kilometers of dense rock, multiple layers of reactive biological shielding, and surviving whatever immune system it has." Darius narrowed his eyes. "And we don't have much time." An emergency summit was called between human commanders, Iolari elders, and, unexpectedly, a representative of the Galactic Accord who had just landed in a sleek silver observation vessel. He was Ambassador Cyrix Velslum, bone-white skin, and eyes that made no effort to hide disdain. "You're attempting to battle an ancient extinction-class entity with mining technology?" he chuckled. "How adorably naive. And spending 30 days in a vote chamber is wise?" Darius shot back, voice sharp. The meeting ended in division. The Accord refused to authorize intervention without sufficient proof that the entity was indeed alive. But Darius and Admiral Solon didn't need permission. They needed a plan. Sarah proposed, "We retrofit a damaged ship, load it with nuclear warheads, and install an overloaded energy core at its center. Then we pilot it directly into a fissure near the creature's core. If successful, the internal explosion will destabilize its biological systems." Vare added, We will assist. The ancient Ayalari crystal scald Shenkaiken enhanced penetration capability. Darius nodded. Then let's begin. And so, humanity and the Ayalari different down to the cellular level now labored side by side to build the largest biological bomb the galaxy had ever seen. A death ship carrying the last hope of a planet. They weren't just fighting an object. They were facing a living nightmare from the beginning of time. And it begun to sense them. 3 days before impact, deep inside the mobile fortress Judicar, the transformation of an old vessel into a living bomb was nearing completion. It was an outdated exploration ship named Night Raven, decommissioned years ago after a failed mission beyond the Cryon Belt. Now, it wore new armor, carried a superheated reactor core, 13 nuclear warheads, and 5 Shenkai crystal sacred relics of the Alari, extracted from ancient temples and delivered through tear-soaked prayers. But not all Alari stood in unity. In a crystalline corridor within the city of Verithan, Alaris Voth was intercepted by a small group in gray robes, the Preservationists, staunch followers of the divine non-intervention doctrine. Their leader, Sol Varn, once a senior advisor and now a shadow prophet, glared at him. "You've betrayed the celestial law," Sol hissed, his voice trembling like an unsheathed blade. "You hand over divine relics to those born of fire and ash." Voth did not flinch. "We don't have time for myth. If we don't act, everything becomes dust." Sol stepped forward, pressing his four-knuckled finger into Voth's chest. "I would rather die in the purity of light than live in the darkness humanity brings." That night, alarms screamed from the lower decks of Night Raven's engineering bay. An internal explosion destroyed the containment unit, housing 3 of the Shenkai crystals. 2 human engineers died instantly. The automated control system was irreparably damaged. Worst of all, the command uplink was severed for 7 full minutes, long enough to suspect sabotage from within. Darius stood on the bridge, eyes bloodshot like the scar across his face. "I want a list of every Alari with technical access in the last 24 hours. "I warned you," Ilera said, stepping in, voice weary. "Among my people, some believe that life after annihilation is purification. They don't seek salvation. They seek to return to the origin light through death." Darius slammed his fist onto the console. Light doesn't save anyone if there's no body left to absorb it. Even with the crystals lost, the work continued. The energy core was reassembled manually. Night Raven now had to be guided by hand, no longer autonomous. To strike the heart of the asteroid creature, it would need live pilots. A crisis meeting was called. 13 officers. One decision. We'll need a manual pilot for navigation, an engineer to maintain the overloading core, a gunner for energy cannons, and a trigger operator for final detonation. Darius looked at his officers. "I'm not ordering this, but I need 5 people willing to die." Silence. Then Lieutenant Jane Kaur stepped forward, a young woman once neurologically injured in the Titan Rift campaign. "I volunteer." Next was Chief Engineer Malik Voss, who once repaired a fusion engine with his bare hands during a neutron storm. "Count me in." The third was an Ailari Vare. He looked at Darius and said, "You brought us hope. I will deliver it where it must go." The fourth and fifth came from the unlikeliest place, 2 young Ailari warriors, born in a generation untouched by pain, but choosing to inherit a legacy of sacrifice. Once the roster was complete, Sarah Miles held Darius's hand. "We're sending them, knowing they won't return." "We have no right to ask them," Darius replied. "But the strange thing is, they do it anyway." 20 hours before impact. The Galactic Accord, now observing with a dispatched fleet near Varelian, issued a formal cease order to humanity. In a heated meeting between human commanders and Ambassador Sirex Vel, patience wore thin. "You are in violation of Clause 7.20, unauthorized military activity within Accord-governed space," Vel said, his voice like corroded metal. Admiral Arya Solon rose, placing a glowing Shenkai crystal on the table. "When death races toward a world at light speed, waiting for permission is a death sentence. We will file a formal protest. You can bury it in paperwork after this planet survives. Inside Night Raven's control deck, 5 beings, 3 species sat together beneath a soft glow. They said nothing. Their nods were enough. The plan was set. When the entity came close enough, they would initiate core ignition, trigger all warheads, pilot the ship into the deepest biological fissure, and detonate from within. There would be no escape pod, no fallback route, only an ending. And when the engineers mounted the final Shenkai crystal into the overloaded core, the light that bloomed wasn't just bright. It sang a hymn of sacrifice, a song for those who would burn, so that another world might live. 18 hours before impact, the black star Shardor, the ancient entity Sir-Nalno, consumed the entire western sky of Varelion. The first rays of dawn no longer lit the crystal lands. They were devoured by a monstrous shadow slithering down from the heavens like a living nightmare. Inside the Judicar, the tactical displays burned crimson. The biological core within the asteroid, located via crystal-enhanced sonar, was contracting. It was alive, and it was aware. In the command center, Admiral Arya Solon stood silent before the slowly rotating 3D map, clad in lightweight pressure armor. Beside her, Colonel Darius Kael said nothing. No more strategies. No more options. Only one mission remained. Authorize the launch of Night Raven. The final command was entered. In Night Raven's control deck, blinking lights shimmered across the panels like candle flames in a storm. Lieutenant Jane Core gripped the helm tightly, her eyes vacant, staring down a predestined flight path. Beside her, Malik Vos monitored the energy core's rising pulse. In the chamber below, Veyer and the 2 young Ilari warriors prayed, their hands touching Shenkai crystal sacred relics, now transformed into fuel for the greatest bomb either race had ever constructed. Begin ignition sequence, Jane said. Malik nodded. The first soft hum echoed like a death heartbeat. One by one, the nuclear warheads armed. Red light surged across the system. The Shenkai turned green, a color never before recorded in the crystal's spectral history. This was no longer energy. This was memory, will, life willing to burn so another could survive. In Verathan's central square, tens of thousands of Ilari gathered, eyes fixed on the sky. Alaris Volth stood beside Sarah Miles, hand tightly clasping hers. On the giant screen, Night Raven soared like a spear of light, piercing toward the cosmic monster. A fissure on its surface, the only visible, scar-gaped like a wound refusing to heal. The ship moved fast, no evasion, no hesitation. And then, everything trembled. Inside Night Raven, the heat surged. Core at 92% overload, Malik shouted. Hold course. 43 seconds to target, Jane barked. A sudden gravity wave burst from Cernal, throwing the ship off balance. The fissure began to close like an eye tightening shut. The entity was defending itself. Keep it open, Jane screamed. Vare grabbed a Shenkai shard from reserve and slammed it into the amplifier. By our light, by our memory, you will open. The crystal flared violently. A lotus-shaped energy pulse exploded outward, forcing the fissure open for 3 final seconds. The ship plunged in. In that moment, there was no more steel, no more crew, only a single arrow of light piercing the heart of darkness. Detonation. There was no sound, only light. A bloom brighter than the sun, as if a god were being born in its dying breath. Cernal's surface cracked open. Stone armor shattered. A scream erupted not in sound, but in rejection of reality as the ancient creature perished. It did not die easily. It fought back. Shockwaves spread across space. Titanic shards hurled outward, smashing into support vessels, rupturing energy lines, dragging fire, metal, and blood into the void. Rescue ships had launched too late to save anyone aboard Night Raven. All signals ceased. Only silence remained, and debris. 2 hours after the explosion, on Varelion, the sun rose. For the first time in days, no shadow veiled the light. No death beam reflected across the crystal. only a gentle, warm glow. The world still existed. The Alari Council convened an emergency summit. Galactic Accord delegates descended from orbit like ants onto a battlefield. But this time, they had no speeches. In the square, a monument was being erected. A crystal ship plunged into a split in space, 5 radiant streams trailing behind, honoring the 5 souls who gave everything. Both addressed the crowd of thousands. Today, we were not only saved from darkness, we were given a memory that sometimes the brightest light a civilization will ever see is sacrifice. Beside him, Sarah Miles wept for the first time. Not from fear, but from pride. On board Judicar, days later, Admiral Arya Solon received an urgent message. The Galactic Accord had held an emergency vote, something that hadn't happened in 300 years. Humanity was approved for full membership. No longer Deathworlders. No longer outsiders. Now designated Guardian Species, a race entrusted to protect life across the Accord. Darius Kyle spoke only one line. Honor doesn't live in metals. It lives in the stone we carve for the dead. In the square, a young Alari girl approached the monument and touched its base. Mother said, "They died for us." A human girl standing beside her nodded. "And we live because they dared to die." Above them, the stars remained silent. But if you listen closely, you might still hear it. The harmony of light and blood whispering forever through space. We came from a world of death to give you the right to live. And when the next world calls, we will come again. Thank you for staying with us until the very end of this journey. If this story moved you, thrilled you, or simply made you dream of greater things, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next great tale. Hit the notification bell to always be the first to hear new stories. And if you have any thoughts or feedback, leave a comment below. I read each one with care. They help me grow every day. Once again, thank you from the bottom of my heart. See you in the next journey where light, sacrifice, and humanity remain at the center of the stars.